My name is Stephanie Cleric, and I'm here with Vern Pirie. It's Wednesday, January 5th, 2014, and we're at Mackin House to have an interview with Vern Pirie. Welcome, Vern.
Yeah, thank you very much. Nice to be here.
Great. All right, so how did you first come to live in Coquitlam?
Well, it goes a long way back to the early war years. I'd spent my young years up in Paul River. My dad joined the Air Force in 1938. My mother and dad decided to separate, and so I ended up coming down to stay with my grandfather and grandmother in Coquitlam, the corner of Linton and Austin. At that time, they lived in a tent, if you could imagine. It had board sides with a tent top, and it had 3 rooms inside and a porch. And I came down, I stayed with them, and enrolled in the school, Austin Street School. And at that time, it was a junior high school. And I was in grade 9 and 10 with them. And that was, I guess, late 41, 42, early 42. And I stayed with them until I started to work. I quit school after grade 10, had enough, and decided I wanted to work for a living. And of course, my grandfather was a minister and a chiropractor, and he had his business in the house, in the tent at that time, and they didn't have very much money. So I decided that it's time I get out on my own. So I went to work for a Boeing aircraft over in Vancouver. Became Rosie the Riveter, so to speak. And I worked for them and stayed with my grandparents out here and part-time with my aunt and uncle in Vancouver. But I spent just about all my weekends out here. So I guess you could say I got established in Coquitlam about 1941. And I stayed in Boeing aircraft until I turned 18 and I joined the Navy. I was going to save the world, I guess, but off I went and had training in Winnipeg, HMCS Winnipeg. Had the basic training, went from there down to Cornwallis, Nova Scotia, and did my naval training. When the war ended, I only had one place to go, and that was back to Coquitlam to stay with my grandparents, which I did, and went to work at a plywood plant down in New Westminster. And I didn't last very long. I got fired after a couple of months. Real cheeky young sailor. And so my dad was in the Air Force over in Vancouver, and I borrowed money from him for a while. And then finally says, "You join up again or else get a job." So I joined up again into the Air Force this time and stayed in for nearly 25 years. And I guess that's about and then I came back. I got married during that time, and I brought my wife and family back to Coquitlam, of course. And I worked at 2 different places as personnel manager in Canadian Kenworth and at CUNC Health Services. And I retired from them, and then we had a house up on Dawes Hill area, Finnegan Street actually, and that was our first house. I'd never had a house before. We stayed in there for 38 years. My wife passed away about 10 years ago, so I moved into a condo down by the Coquitlam Center. But I know you'd like to know about my sojourn with my grandparents when I was younger. It was a great place to grow up in. I really enjoyed being out in the woods with my grandfather. There's places in the book that I gave of Glen Allen. He built his house, but every morning before I went to school, I had to get wood and go down to the gully and get water from my grandmother with a yoke on my shoulder, and up it came. So I was in pretty good condition. And we used to go swimming up in Monday Lake. Had to tramp up through the bush. It was just a logging road. They'd logged Monday Park years before that. There was still pieces of the chute that they put the logs on to shoot them down to Fraser Mills. And so we had, my grandfather built trails and so on through the property. We had lots of people come up there to see them, and winter was fun. I never learned how to skate, but I sure as hell, well, pardon the language, but I spent a lot of time plowing through snow drifts. You had to walk to school in those days. We had one street lamp between Linton and the school. And the school in those days, of course, was where the Rona and all the stores around there at that time, and you know the pub and so on. That whole complete block was schoolyard, and the elementary school and the junior high. And we had a not a grocery store, just a corner store in the corner of the schoolyard. And of course, here we were, 14, 15. That's where we used to get our cigarettes. They had a great big fish bowl filled with cigarettes. We could buy them a penny a piece. So that's where I learned how to smoke. We made our own toboggans and so on. Went down Marmont. Cars couldn't get up it, so they threw sand down the bottom. We would ride down that hill. Why I got out of it alive, I don't know. There was no curb, so it was just ditches with big rocks in. So, and we had a good time as kids. We were out all the time, either swimming or fishing in the lake. Used to spend Saturday afternoons down at Essendale, which is, of course, it's not Colony Farm now, but they had a complete farm down there, cows and vegetables, and they had a big barn with all the wheat and stuff in it, and we spent a lot of time just down there playing around the farm when we were younger. And the patients were great. They built a diving platform and everything up at Monday Lake, and it was a great place. It was, I would have to say, quarter again as big as it is now. And of course we used to try Como Lake, of course, occasionally, but it was sort of full of frogs and snakes and all that sort of stuff. But we did a lot of swimming there too. And after I joined up, and as I say, I spent all my any leave and so on, I'd come back here, and it was great to be back. I had a lot of friends around. And then, as I said too, that this is where my kids grew up. So I've been, as it says, 1966. I guess I retired from the service. And I told you the jobs that I had, and I still enjoy Coquitlam, but I'm lost when I look around and see what's happened to all the forests and the trails and because we didn't have, there was nothing on the hill here except a few houses down Marmont, down the hill. But yeah, I thoroughly and still enjoyed Coquitlam. I always have. I guess this is where I'll be ending up anyways. I'm not going anywhere. So what else can I tell you?
I'd like to know more about this house that your grandfather had on the corner of Linton and Austin.
Yeah, see.
How big was it, and was it a farm? Was it a homestead? Did you have animals?
Okay, he bought, from all of I know about that, he bought the 5 acres for $25 during the Depression years. And he'd retired in New Westminster. He was a chiropractor and a Baptist minister. And he'd gone up to Paul River to be with some of our relatives up there, and didn't really like it, came back down here, spent a little while in Vancouver, and then came out here to the property. Now it was strictly, the only animals he had were his own. He had a dog, of course, and he had cats, and he had an aviary with all different birds, and he raised pheasants, golden pheasants. He raised these. Had his own, he grew all his own vegetables and so on. And of course he had, as I say, had trails through the property. Down there, it had a gully in it. He had trails down one side and bridges from logs. You walked over to the other side, and we got all our water from the creek at the bottom. He'd built, what'd you say? I guess boxes on the side of the creek where the water came through, and he always had a few trouts in there. So the water was always clean. I mean, no bugs or anything. I used to go down every morning and get water and firewood from my grandmother before I went to school. That was one of my chores. By the time I went into the service, I was hard as nails. There was no laying around those days. But he left the property in natural state. My aunt, one of my grandfather's daughters, my aunt, and her husband came out here in, I guess, 1948, and built a house on the same property. And so there was the two houses on the property. So we had lots of room when we came home on leave or vacations. And when I got out of the service, we stayed there for 2 or 3 months while my kids got registered in school, and I bought a house. So it's always seemed like home. Coquitlam is I never found any place better, that's for sure. And we spent 4 years over in Britain while I was in the Air Force, up north in Cold Lake for 4 years. I was all over the place, and I couldn't wait to get back out here, and it's still that way. Getting more difficult now with the traffic just to find my way home, but it was, yeah. Am I talking too much?
No, you're talking a great amount. So I have another question about your memories from that house and growing up. What types of things were you growing in the garden, and did you have anything that was homemade? Did you have any homemade toys? Were there any, did you do homemade soaps or canning at home, jarring, pickling, any of that your mother or your grandmother had done?
My grandfather had a workshop, and he had a lathe and things like that. The lathe was worked by foot because he didn't have electricity all over the place. In actual fact, when we lived in the tent, first of all, before I left to go away, we read by coal lamps. That's how I read at night, did my homework and so on. And no, I don't think. Oh, what was the question again?
Were there any homemade goods or?
Well, he made a lot of souvenirs. So he called it Glen Allen souvenirs. Like he made everything out of yew wood. Yeah, I don't know whether you ever seen anything yew wood. It's got the red and sort of yellowish type of wood, and he made letter openers and bookends and all that sort of stuff. But no, that's about the extent of it. But as far as the garden goes, it was a basic, potatoes, carrots, corn, and he loved to had some fruit trees. He loved to draft fruit trees and get different fruit on the trees. They were pretty self-sufficient as far as the basic food went. And there was nowhere to go to anymore. I used to go to, if I wanted to go to New Westminster, I'll walk from there down, all the way down to, I guess at the bottom of what? Where the school, elementary school is down here off of...
On Blue Mountain?
No. What's the street just out here?
We're on Brunette.
Yeah, Brunette. Right down Brunette and then the schoolhouse.
Oh, okay.
Right?
So by Millside School.
Yeah. And we'd walk all the way down there, and there was a bus. Twice a day came out. We'd catch the bus and go in New Westminster, come back, walk all the way up the hill again. And I guess by the time I got back, I'd been in the service for a while, they finally had a bus service. That's another thing that up on Austin Road, everybody where Linton is, you go down and went like this. Well, in the early years out there, there was a bridge over there. It was a bridge that wasn't filled in. And I guess must have been just before or just after I went on the service. Somebody with a heavy truck went through the bridge, so they took it out, and people couldn't drive along there for a long time. They finally filled it in. They had to dig down. See, at that time, Austin was up higher. A lot of the houses you see have, even there, and now you drive along Austin, they have a bank on either side. And the road once upon a time came up the top of that, went right across the bridge. When they built the bridge, they dug that out and used it for a fill. So that was something when they did that. They finally after that, they got a bus service. We didn't have a bus service all the time I went to school. I don't know, what else I can tell you?
Can you tell me about some of the holidays and how they were celebrated? Christmas, Easter, and since Valentine's is coming up,
Christmas.
How that was celebrated maybe at school, if there was a Valentine's exchange at school, things like that?
Well, let's look at Christmas first of all. It's pretty basic. We'd always get a Christmas tree and decorate it up and have Christmas dinner, and there was no fancy present. Everybody would get something. I'm lucky if I got a pair of socks, and that sort of stuff. And it was the same. I didn't have any money. I'd sometime work on the weekends in a peat farm down in the flats, or work in the down the brewery in Saverton, pushing boxes around. They wouldn't let us go inside, but we loaded boxcars, so I was like that. And I worked, as I say, in the peat fields and did some lathing on some houses. Those are the sort of things that I did during the summer. And so we didn't have very much money. But it never bothered us, really. And but the schools, school would have a a dance or a do, all the guys stand over one side and all the girls on the other. I don't think I ever danced until I went in the Navy. But we were there, and school was pretty good. Mr. Mowat was the principal. Got sent down a couple of times. In those days, there was no compunction about not giving you a strap across the hand, a good big thick one, things like that. But it never hurt us. We never did the same thing twice. I'll tell you that much. But they were good. They were good teachers, as far as I can remember. There's only one story I remember, that one of the teachers in the woodworking or the machine shop, I was fooling around, I guess, and he took me by the arms and slammed me up against the wall, and I said, okay. And I walked out the door and came home. My grandfather went back with me and had a talk with the teacher. But those sort of things that we went through in those days. But they were all things that you like to remember. We never had any problems. I don't think I had a beer in my life until I went into service. And
cigarettes, not the beer.
Cigarette. Smoked from the time I was 13 until I was 68. That's why my voice is funny. But, I don't know what else I can tell you.
What types of games do you remember playing as you were growing up, or do you remember having any toys even?
Toys. No, I think I spent most of my my time. I read a lot as a kid. I had animals, always had dogs, cats. Had a BB gun once, and I hit a guy in just above his eye, and my father took it away, and I never saw it again. But as far as toys go, no, I didn't. I can't remember. Well, as a real young guy, yeah, I had trucks and things like that. But by the time I got down here, I didn't. I spent most of my time outside, swimming, playing ball with the kids, hiking through the trails. We were always doing something. We were always busy. Didn't have time to play. When I did have time, I read a lot. So, well, there was a few board games, I guess, that I can remember, but they weren't anything unusual. Nothing that extraordinary.
What was popular at that time? What kind of board games were popular?
I think the basic ones: checkers, snakes and ladders. Yeah, I can't remember any of the rest of them that I did. I never much of playing board games until I had kids of my own. Then I didn't have any choice. I had to do.
So when you were growing up, what kind of chores were you responsible for?
Like what? How do you mean? What you mean responsible?
Chores. What types of chores did you do around the house?
Oh, chores.
Chores, yes.
I'm sorry. I thought you said toys. Yeah, that's my hearing. Chores, well, of course, say I had to get water, split wood, help my grandfather in the garden, feed the birds. Have to run errands for my grandmother sometimes. Well, I had lots to keep me going. You know, that's how I was helping. I used to help my grandfather quite a bit. He had another thing I should tell you. At the side of the house that's showing you in here, he built the sundial, but he also also built a great big wheel along the side of the house for pulling out water and logs and so on from the gully. I helped him build some of that when I was home. I didn't have time to do it. He built the house after I was away. After I was away in the service, so I wasn't very much helpful there. But I helped him on the trails, clearing the trails and helping with bridges across the water. Yeah, I was busy. I didn't give very much time to myself. I split wood. I used a crosscut saw, cut wood, cut trees down, helped my grandfather with build a sundial. He taught me a lot, and all the training I have, or all the tools I can use, I learned from him. He taught me how to use a saw and a hammer and which way to go and when to do it right, and yeah, that's where I learned most of my skills at that. I never turned out to be a good builder though, but when we got our own house here in Coquitlam, built our own rec room and so on like that, so yeah.
Was there any hunting or fishing that happened in that area?
Was there any what?
Was there any hunting or fishing?
No, I used to fish as a kid for trout, things like that, but no, there wasn't very much. Used to come down to the Fraser Mills once in a while and swim in the river. I never told anybody at home about that. But we used to, as kids, swim in the river. And it's a wonder we all came out alive. But I mean, not out in the middle, when the eddies came home where the log booms were and so on. And of course, in those days too, Fraser Mills, you came down here, and when you left, came down Marmont and crossed Burnett. It was just rode straight into Fraser Mills, and it was down in the gully, and they had all wooden sidewalks. They were all wooden because during the spring and the falls, they were floating sometimes. That's the only way you get around. We used to spend quite a bit of time down here around the mill. And of course, the street down here was pretty basic. This place here was about the biggest house there was. The rest, small homes all the way down. Let's see, what else did we do? Boy, it's kind of hard to dig that stuff off after all these years. But
do you remember any of the big floods that happened in Coquitlam?
The floods?
Yeah. And how people reacted to these floods?
Well, I guess the only things I can remember were down here at the mill when they got pretty well flooded out, But no, living up on top of the hill, they were never concerned. Actually, after I was in the service, I got sent out here. I was from Rivers, Manitoba, when they had the floods out here. But I was in the Air Force at that time. And spent a couple of weeks out here. But I was just filling sandbags, wasn't doing anything else. No, I don't think as a kid that I really spent a lot of time going down to Essendale at the time, as I said, the farm. And we knew a bunch of the kids. They came to our school up here on Austin from Essendale. So we used to go down there occasionally. And they had a big workshop and ball field and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, we used to go down there quite often. But it fades. It's hard to really visualize what we did. But it was of course, in those days, it was a real nice place to be down there. And the patients, they never bothered us. They spoke to us. They were all the ones that were out around doing their thing. As I said, they built a platform up at the lake, and they all came up there. I guess it was the best therapy in the world for them, and they took it away from them. But quick, give me another.
All right. What world events do you think impacted you the most? Which war or even other large events that happened either in Coquitlam or in the world? What do you think influenced your life or impacted your life the most?
My life, I went away in the Navy, trained, and spent most of my time in Halifax. I think the thing you remember the most, of course, is when the war ended. We had a couple of German submarines come in, they towed in there. All these young guys, 18, 19, they'd been out for 4 months or something, I think. But anyway, those sort of things. There was nothing real exceptional, and even during my wartime. I was lucky. I got to go out on a couple of patrols and things like that, but nothing real. I guess I was nervous. I was a signalman up on the bridge, lights and flags, but I wasn't out at sea very much. I was lucky. No, there was nothing even around here that really happened that sticks in my mind that was scary, thing like that. Especially during the time I was here all the time, which was during wartime. People were busy, working and doing their thing, and most of the guys were away, and most of the friends that I knew, male friends, they all ended up in the service, same as I did. No, it was a lot of people would say it's a dull time, but I like to think it was a good time.
So before the interview, you actually mentioned a little bit about your time in Ocean Falls.
Oh, yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about that and maybe how the mill site there was different or similar to what you know of Fraser Mills?
Say that again, how I felt about Ocean Falls.
Ocean Falls?
Yeah.
And how you feel that area was similar or different to Fraser Mills area?
Well, yeah, I went up there, as I say, with my mother. Lived in the house. I spent a lot of time outside. Basically, because of the situation with my mother and her friend. But I spent a lot of time out on the beach and up at the lake, and they had a big pool up there. That's where some of our best swimmer came from, was from Ocean Falls, because it was only this second pool in BC, I think, or indoor pool at that time during the war. And so we had a couple of real swimmers that came out of Ocean Falls. They went to the Olympics and everything else, and but it was a mill town. It was a paper mill, and didn't see very many people. The only way you could get in there was by boat, and it's still that way, although they fly in now. I don't think they were even flying in at that time. There was nothing really extraordinary in my life that I can pinpoint, except everything in Coquitlam here that the kid could do. I did. I was fortunate. I never drowned myself or that. I was in the water an awful lot, and whenever I could. And that's what I did, and that's what I ended up. My sport was competing in the pool and teaching and coaching, and I still swim about 3 times a week and work out twice. And yeah.
Good for you.
Yeah, it was good. Excellent.
Could you tell me a little bit about
Yeah.
the photos that you brought in today?
This is the house, and also the sundial my grandfather made out of cedar tree. He cut this tree down and cut a piece off it and made the dial itself. And he could tell, and he had this one piece of cedar came down with a hole at the top, which shone the sun down onto the dial. He could tell the time everywhere in the world for that thing. That's the type of man he was. He was brilliant. And that's just a couple taken in the yard. And that day is.
What we'll do is talk about each picture, and then I'll shoot the pictures.
Okay.
Pardon me?
You'll talk about each picture, and then he'll get a shot of it.
Oh.
Okay.
This picture here, yeah, this is my grandfather and myself standing beside a sundial that he made from cedar tree. He cut the cedar tree down and he cut one slab, and he put all the different cities and countries on the dial, and in the center of the dial, he made a spoke wheel out of cedar, and in the center was a Union Jack, and each spoke that came out from the wheel. When you put it around, you could tell the time wherever that wheel spoke. And he had it. The sun came in at the top of this piece of cedar that he had curved. How long it took him to do that, I don't know. But and it shone down onto the dial, and that's how he could tell the. And then the picture below is the house that he built, and the only thing he bought was glass and shiplap. He got all the wood from the shakes and everything from the forest, right from his own land. That's how he built it. All the posts, the beams, everything made out of the wood from his property. And I was fortunate enough to help him on some of it, but I was away most of the time when he built that.
Did it have running water or electricity at any point?
Well, the tent that we had no running water, no electricity. But when he moved into here, he finally got electricity and he got running water. We even had a bathroom after a while. When we first moved in, and the first time that I moved there, we still had to go to an outhouse. But yeah, he had everything in there. And then I gave you some of his pages that you are getting done. But in the bedroom I slept in at the corner of the house, actually it was his study. He had the Union Jack painted done up in cedar up on the ceiling. I wake up every morning and see that. I just about salute every time I saw it. And of course my grandmother, and she cooked in an old wooden coal stove, and she didn't have a fridge. She had a, what would you call it outside?
Icebox?
No icebox. No icebox. It's outside.
Oh,
What
like
did
a
they
cold
call them
room?
in those days?
A cold room?
No, it was a It was
Cellar.
it was just shelves outside with a screen on it, so. But it was always in the shade. But no, we didn't even have a root cellar. No, nothing like that. No. But I don't know. I thought it was a great place. Of course, I'd spent a lot of time with my grandparents in Westminster when they were in there, and when I was just a kid and growing up, I got sent down from Paul River every summer and stayed there all summer. So they were more like a parents than my own parents, I guess, to some extent. Oh, you don't want to look at that.
Do you have any of the other photos you want to talk about here?
No, I didn't bring any other photographs. The only thing that on the back of that was me in uniform, and that was Ocean Falls school class, and a bit of the. No, if I'd known you were going to ask, I could have brought quite a few more pictures.
Oh, okay.
But then, what's the fellow's name? George, is it?
Doug?
Doug. So he said, stick with Coquitlam. So I've been trying to do that. And I can't really think of, but when I was going to school up here, it was pretty rustic, and the municipality, that is. Like, you take Coma Lake Road, it only came down to Gatesbury. Gatesbury come down because you went up Linton. My grandfather, by the way, had named Linton. He named it, yeah. And he was also a magistrate here and across the street. Where are we? Yeah, right across the street in the old city hall. He was magistrate for, I think, about 11 years. I'd hate to have to come up in front of him, I'll tell you. But some of those pages that your friend is duplicating tells the story of some of the cases he had.
Do you know how he came to the name Linton? If he named Linton, where did that name come from?
Then I think it came from my grandmother. Her name was Lucinda, and I think he used her name to name it Linton. I don't know what the Lynn. I really don't know. And there was very few. See, when I was a kid then, we'd walk up just 2 blocks up Linton, and they had to stop because everywhere down this side of the Coma Lake Shopping Center, that's why there was no road after Gatesbury, because you came down there and everything flooded in there during the winter. Well, in fact, it was full of water all the time. That's why the lake was so good. It had lots of runoff. But you couldn't go down. It was full of water and muskeg and everything then. They had to drain that whole thing to build the houses that they have now. But when we were kids, it was just water. What else?
What are some of the big changes that you've seen in Coquitlam? So you talked a little bit already about how your school is now a Rona and the area that's a parking lot.
Yeah.
Are there any other big changes that you've seen? And this could include shopping centers or
just about
development.
everything, because you take the schools where they are, there was nothing up there, of course, up those roads, no libraries, nothing like that. When you came down Gatesbury, came past the lake, there was nothing up near Coma Lake Road. There were some houses along there, but No, it was pretty rustic, let me tell you. Then they had, we had a few farms and so on in those days. Up in those areas and those houses up there. There was no houses, there was quite a few small farms. What else?
What about the area?
Oh, we used to, that was hard to believe, but we used to go up to Bunsen Lake. And the only way you could get there was to go all the way down Austin, go down North Road and down the hill through Fort Moody and around the inlet and to the refinery. And they would let us put our bikes in the refinery because they had a trail that went up to Bunsen. And we would go all that way to have a swim. There's no lifeguard, no nothing. We go up to hike all the way into Bunsen and spend the day up there and then come back. And of course, coming back was real difficult because you had to push the bike all the way up the hill. There was no other way you could do it. So we spent a lot of time doing things like that. That was a great place to go for swimming. You talk about what is it, white sand beach now? I couldn't even see that. It was because all it came to the one end. The first end, there was no road or anything else, and this is where you swam. It was full of logs and stuff like that, and it never got down to there. But we used to swim across that end of the lake. Every time I tell these stories, I shake my head wondering, how did we ever get out of not being drowned or something, But yeah, it was a great place for kids to grow up in, as far as I'm concerned. But that, none of these roads to go to Poco in those days, everything used to flood in Poco. And I had a grandmother that lived down there for a while. There used to be a rubber factory down there where the bridge is, goes out. But what is the name of the street? There used to be the one street you go now and go over the bridge going into Poco. That was the main street. That's all there was. God, I could go on for hours. You make me think about all these things, You don't think of them until somebody asks you about them. And to go into town, as I said, was a real chore. But we did it. I used to go in the show every once in a while. Take you on.
I was going to ask, where was the main shopping area in Coquitlam? If you wanted to go buy groceries or clothing, where would you go in the
There wasn't any. There wasn't any. No. New Westminster. Everybody went to New Westminster to go shopping. Either drove in, if you were lucky, you have a vehicle. We didn't, but once my grandfather and grandmother would walk all the way down to down here to Burnett, catch a bus. There was no stores out here. The biggest thing, I guess, was the golf course. I used to caddy in there for 25 cents a round. That was another way I made money, caddying on the golf course. That's where I first swung a golf club. I should have stopped right there. It's still no good. Anyway. Yeah.
I was going to ask about since you live so close to it, the corner of Mundy and Austin.
Yes.
Was it dirt road at that time? Were there any outposts there? What was that street corner like?
I got about 10 more minutes. Just across the gully, across the bridge, there was an old Hudson Bay trading post. And There was no, as I say, there was no roads there was no park there. You know, where the park is down around the lake, there was none. There was no roads up there at all. But we came to Monday Road. That was it. They had, I guess, a little way along Austin. They had the works yards pretty close, just past that. But then you had to go down Monday Road. You go to Monday and Dawes Hill, but there was no road past that. All of that area up there had been an old orchard. It had been a big house in there, a big stone house at the end of Monday Road. Monday Road came down and you went to the right and went down Dawes Hill. That was it. There were no houses built at the top of the hill. Then it was all orchard or other type trees. And not many of us went down that direction because that would just mean we had that much further to go to get down here to catch a bus or go into town. Every once in a while somebody would go that way just so you could ride the bike down the hill. There was nothing past that. There was the highway into Poco went around the bottom of the hill. But there was no actual highway. It was just the road that went into Poco. Where the old bridge used to be and so on. That was the only way to get in there. It wasn't. Even Poco itself was pretty small.
Was that the Pitt River Bridge you're talking
Yeah.
about? Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
Mm-hmm. And then that was also your route to Essendale when you went to go to Colony Farms area?
Well, we sometimes we go cut through Essendale, yeah, because it was all open to go down there. It was trails, see. There was no road like there is now going up the side of the hill. Note.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry, guys. I got to pick up my lady pretty soon, so I can't stay too long.
Okay.
Couple more questions.
Could I ask too, one about just your early memories of North Road, what North Road would have been like?
Well, same route as it is now, but it was fairly narrow. Some of it was, the hill going down into Port Moody was gravel. It wasn't paved. The upper part of North Road wasn't paved. I guess the lower part, we used to go down to Hume Park every once in a while. There was no swimming pool or anything. But that reminds me, went down, yeah, you go down there, North Road, when you're going into Sapperton, when you go down the gully, you was halfway down, there was a logging road or something in there. It had been dammed up. There was a swimming hole in there. We used to go down swimming in that creek down there. The creek going into the park. And yeah, we go all that way to have a swim sometimes.
So you swam all over Coquitlam?
Well, Sapperton, I mean, yeah, Sapperton was a nice place to be. You know, it was, I don't know, just had a lot of friends and things like that down there.
Could I ask your early memories of North Road, was that the original North Road, or where Clark, you know, where it goes down into Port Moody, they changed the North Road?
No, they down the hill. They didn't make that the North Road Clark. Clark goes down the hill, eh? And it used to be all North Road as far as we were concerned, but I guess it was, it didn't extend. North Road didn't extend until later.
Right. And how much steeper grade going down, I guess, is why they put Clark in to reduce that.
Well, yeah. But we used to ride down that damn thing on our bike. Gravel road. That's amazing. Maybe that's why we made such good service guys during the war. Nothing could hurt you. Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure, though, coming up here.
Thank you for coming and speaking to us.
Yeah.